Hello. Today's book is The War on Alcohol, Prohibition, and the Rise of the American State by Lisa McGirr. So this book, how did I come by this book? I was at my local library, and I had to pick up some books that were on hold for me, and then I walked into the stacks and looking around a little bit, and this one just sort of was up there and said, read me, read me. So I thought, okay, I'll take the book out and read it. So I did, and it's quite interesting. It is the history of Prohibition from the beginnings of it all through to the end of it. And, it's a history book. So what did I learn in this book? Oh, let me, before you click off, I want to tell my Prohibition story. When I was a kid, I grew up in Ohio, and my last name is Carter, and my father was born in Olive Hill, Kentucky, and his parents moved up to Canton, Ohio, to work in the industrial steel mills, so forth, because they were uneducated working class people and hillbillies, basically. So my grandfather and grandmother and I drove down from Ohio to Carter County, Kentucky, where Grandpa was from. And in the course of that visit, some relative was ill or something, I don't know. I didn't really know the Kentucky people all that well, and I didn't know the young cousins, I was a teen then, and I didn't know the young cousins that I was out riding around with. And this is where the Prohibition things come in, because it was a dry county. And so they said, okay, we're going to go get some beer. So, okay, how's this work? So they just drove up to somebody's house, somebody's Appalachian house, and I stayed in the car, and one or two of them got out and went into the house and came back out with a burlap bag filled with beer cans. And so that's how the beer was distributed there. So yeah, it was prohibited, but available. So that's, Furthermore, they said they were going to then get me some pussy. Fortunately, that did not transpire, which I was fortunate, because I was kind of nervous about that end of the whole hillbilly adventure with my relatives. So, back to the book. Yeah, and actually that kind of vibe, that kind of Southern Protestant thing, was part of what really drove the Prohibition to become law. I mean, this is a constitutional amendment. That's sort of serious stuff. So the 18th Amendment. So that was part of it, and right after the World War, that was also part of it, where the state had gotten involved, the United States had gotten involved in this big war, this big thing altogether, and involving a foreign power like that, or foreign powers. At any rate, it came down that alcohol was then prohibited in all the states. And, local, as I said before here, local ordinances went on beyond that and were there before that. So there were already some states that were dry, but this was this national thing. This sort of dry thing went on, I think she said in the end of the book, that some places till 1975, so it's, really in the Deep South and all these very Christian places really permeated with this sort of Protestant evangelical thing, really permeated all that area and drove that desire to end sin. So Yeah, well, it didn't work out very well, as we know, because it was all rescinded, repealed in 1933, which is not that much longer, 14 years later. Um, Now, some people think that it should have gone on from there. I mean, I'm not a drinker. I don't really like to drink. I had drank a little bit in my youth, and I just think it's too dangerous for me because I know I have addictive uh, temperament. I'm addicted to reading these books. I read books all the time, so I know that I'm addicted, and I don't think I should be messing around with alcohol, so I don't. So that's why my mom was very anti-alcohol, so and wanted me to read books. I didn't get along with my mom, so here I am, not drinking and reading books. So I'm a good mama's boy after all, even though she's been dead, almost 50 years. Um, so yeah, what went on with the alcohol, with the Prohibition, and why it all fell apart was that at the same time there was this big influx of all this immigration from Eastern Europe and all these other ethnic sort of cultures, Catholics coming in. And they had, drinking is more of a part of their culture, like wine, things like that. And plus being working class and having few, pleasures that they can indulge in. So they were not happy with the whole Prohibition thing, and it was not fair. The Volstead Act was the enforcement arm of this thing, how they were going to legally penalize people and stop it with the law, with cops and robbers and all that stuff. So, but it was unequal to begin with. So of course, all these things they set up, it ends up being all right for you poor people. We're going to cut it off for you, but we rich people, we're just going to keep doing what we want. For like one thing, if you whatever you already had at home, you could keep. So if you're rich, you could go buy all the whiskey you wanted, all the wine, all the whatever you wanted before the deadline and store it in your house. Plus, there's all kinds of ways to get things, in the black market. So yeah, the rise of the black market, the inequity of the rich, and also the problems of the bootleg stuff. Okay, so it's easier to move around, whiskey than it is beer. So therefore, the underground market favors whiskey over beer, as it favors heroin over opium, which he recounts in this too, because it's smaller, lighter, it's not as fragrant, and anyway, so it ended up changing what people end up drinking. They ended up drinking industrial alcohol, all that kind of stuff like that, a bathtub gin. She talks about how entrepreneurial people became. So, working class women or whoever started making their own, homebrew of stuff. You could buy stills. You could, there ended up being this whole big structure of cops that were built around this trying to keep people away from alcohol, you needed a whole police force to deal with this, and you needed a surveillance system. Now, part of that was also like vigilantism, like people volunteered to be anti-alcohol, to do the good fight for sobriety, including the Ku Klux Klan. And meanwhile, a lot of these people are hypocritical about it. The Klansmen might like to drink, but they might like to keep the black people from drinking and also like murder them at the same time. So so all these converging forces made it just a mess. In 1924, the presidential election, that's when the Democrats ran Al Smith, who was from New York and who was Catholic. So he was going to be the first Catholic to be president if he won. And of course he didn't, and it ended up being Kennedy for a brief time. So Al Smith was kind of selling the dry thing and got some mileage out of it. And what she sort of says in here is that the Al Smith campaign kind of set the conditions, and by the time that Roosevelt ran in 32, wait a minute, Al Smith was in 20, I guess he ran in 28 as well, or only ran in 28. Anyway, you can look it up yourself. So when Roosevelt ran in 32, he was, the convention, the Democratic Convention was part of their platform to repeal, and the country was ready to repeal by that time, and they, in fact, did repeal. Like by December of 33, I guess he came into the office. I don't know when they inaugurated then. Now they do it in January. In a certain part of this book, they're doing it in March, inaugurating the new president. So I don't know when they did it with Roosevelt, but by December of that year, there was repeal of Prohibition. Now, how they repealed and what they did, I don't think they did a good job of it, because, well, I'm basically anti-alcohol, and they just handed it back to the capitalists, and they allowed them to advertise and all that stuff, and the whole propaganda pro-alcohol thing surged ahead, and after spending 14 years of people growing up in an environment where it's exciting and illegal, there's a whole generation of people who are set to be drinkers because it's exciting and illegal. So, and that's my grandparents that I was talking about just then with the Carters, who took me to Kentucky. They were both drinkers. She was not a hillbilly. She was a Serbian, full-blooded Serbian. Anyway, both of them were drinkers, like all through my life. They were fairly heavy drinkers through their entire lives. So, of course, my mom hated that. And my dad had some drinking situations, too, for a while. So my dad's wrecking the car one time, and my mom's attitudes, plus going to the drive-in and seeing the Days of Wine and Roses when I was a little kid, like 10 or something, which blew my mind. Anyway, this is what made me a pothead and not an alcoholic. So, and I'm kind of grateful for that, because I think alcohol is a much harder drug, and I know that it's much more addicting to some of us who are prone to addiction. Let's see, what else did I want to talk about in this? Oh yeah, around the same time, there was the drug thing started up as well, the prohibition of drugs, marijuana, which was connected to basically more of a regional thing, was connected to the Mexicans, you know, the Zoot Suit stuff and all that. So the Mexicans were kind of connect marijuana, you know, sort of a Spanish kind of name. So that was the drug prohibition thing took off after the Prohibition and went on for years and years and years. And she talks about the rise of the police state during all this, the rise of the penal system federally. Like, you know, she gives us statistics about how many prisoners were in federal prisons in 1920 as opposed to 1930, and you know, it's like 5 times more or twice as more or whatever, you know. So all these federal prisons were getting crowded with all these alcohol cases, which parallels the marijuana thing, or the war on drugs, which occurred later in the 70s, through the 70s and into today, actually. So yeah, it really was an interesting history book. So if you're interested in history and drugs we take and the rise of America and how it got to be, you know, invasive into our lives, and think that they could pull off coercive things like we're going to decide what you do or what you don't do, and the forces within the culture that fight against these things and push back and make it stop. It's a good book to read, and I liked it. She has another book that says about the suburban right or something. What is it? Where's the title? Suburban Warriors, The Origins of the New American Right. That's another book of Lisa McGirr. Yeah, this was good. Actually, she talks about how the new right has its origins in this period of early 20th century, the rise of the churches and how they took power and started using their power for this particular political point of view for prohibition. So that's an interesting part of the book too. I liked reading the book. I can't imagine that many people be interested in this video because it's not a popular book. But I thank you for watching and listening to me, and like and subscribe. And we'll talk to you next time. I think I'm going to read a novel next. So, and I've heard some interesting things that I've clicked on and have coming from the library, including the new Paul Theroux novel about George Orwell in Burma, which sounds really interesting. So 80-year-old novelist, so that ought to be good. Anyway, we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.